Afternoon, good evening everyone. Hello everyone in this room, on the balcony, in the other room. I'm intrigued if there's anyone in the other room actually. Should we do an experiment now? Okay, if there's anyone in the other room, I'm going to count to 3. When I get to 3, I want you to say hello, okay? So there's either going to be noise or silence. 1, 2, 3. Yeah! How good is that? So this is the second TEDx talk that I've done. And ironically, the second time I've had to go on after J.J. Abrams. Such is my luck. I'm glad I went on after him this time, actually, because there was a quote. I'm going to change the name of my talk today. It's not going to be called Shoot the Summer. It's going to be called, taking a quote directly from him that I've just written down. No community is best served when only the elite have control. So today I'm going to talk about a film that I made called Shoot the Summer. It was a film shot entirely on mobile phones in the summer of, when was it? 2008, 2009. And there's lots of reasons why I made this film, why I shot it on mobile phones, and why I got the audience to do it as well. But I just want to start the whole thing off by asking a question. Do any of us really think about, we're 10 years into this decade, the first decade of the 21st century, and I just wonder how much we look back at the progresses in technology and innovation, and wonder how much what we've achieved in the last 10 years, what kind of effect that will have on the next 90 years. Will we be looking back at this decade and say that was a really, really important time for the media? Personally, I do. I really do. I just wonder whether people will look back at, with the birth of YouTube, will people in the media look back at Star Wars kid in 90 years' time, and, with the same fondness as that we look back at Chaplin, at the start of the last century. What will people make of David after the dentist, and, all these crazy things that we see on YouTube? Because whether we like it or not, everything that we do digitally leaves some sort of historical digital footprint, and people interpret in different ways in the future. So I personally believe what we are doing now will have a huge impact on the next 90 years. So it's kind of, it's hard to imagine that YouTube is only about 4 or 5 years old. We seem to have, it just feels like it's been around forever. And it was about 6 months after the birth of YouTube that I was sat at Radio 1 having a conversation with a producer who looks after all the visualization stuff that we do. And he does a brilliant job, and he goes out and makes these absolutely beautiful films, which we put on our website, but, they are of a quality that can go on TV. And YouTube had been around about 6 months, and I was starting to think that because our audience was starting to get used to seeing pixelated films and stuff being shot on mobile phones, perhaps we could start dropping the level of some of the stuff that we do, if there's a justifiable reason. At which point, Will argued with me and says, no way, with the BBC, we have to sustain this level of quality. We should never ever be producing stuff like that. And I kind of, had the other point of view that if there was a case for it, if there's a need for it, our audience will grow to accept it in the same way that they accept high quality stuff. It will just become part and parcel of their everyday life, and that probably doesn't seem strange in any way at all. It seems like a moot point now, but back then it was a really, really big conversation point between the two of us. So based on that, I thought, I'll prove it to him. I'll go out and make a film. I'll shoot the whole thing on mobile phone, and yes, it will be grainy, but I'll screen it on a huge screen at a cinema. And that's what I did. About a year and a half later, made a film called Shoot the Summer. And what I did was I went to a load of festivals with a bag full of mobile phones, and then handed them out to people at the festivals and said, go off and shoot whatever the hell you want, just give me the phone back at the end of the festival. And that's what I did. And I made a film. It was an hour long, and it was screened at the Electric Proms Festival at the Camden Roundhouse in 2008. And it went on to win a Guardian Media Award, and was nominated for several other awards. And it was great. And the really weird thing was I assumed that, because it was shot entirely on mobile phones at the time, I assumed that there would be a level of interest afterwards, and I might be invited to speak at some conferences about it. But to be honest, I didn't really think I'd still be speaking about it 2 years later, because I assumed that it would it would become so commonplace, and so many different people would be getting people to take their mobile phones and make movies and stuff like that. I assume that by now, 2 years later, so many people will be doing it, and it's still quite novel, and that kind of surprises me a little bit. I kind of thought people would have picked up the baton and ran with the idea. So I was talking at a conference last year, and it was towards the end of the year, and it was around about that time when, at the end of a decade, everyone starts talking about, what's your favourite album of the decade, what's the film of the decade. And just as I was coming home from this conference, I was reading a magazine, and it had all these end of decade things, and one of the issues was what's the icon of the decade, and people saying the iPod, the iPhone, the Wii, and I got thinking about it, and I started thinking maybe the megapixel is the icon of the decade, And what I mean by that is, when I think of the first 10 years of this century, I really think about YouTube, mobile phones, and I start to think about things like the evolution of dance, and like I said before, Star Wars Kid and Charlie Bit My Finger, and Sneezing Panda and numerous dogs on skateboards. You think about them, they're all shot in really pixelated cameras, but not only do I think about that, I also think about prisoners being tortured, Abu Ghraib. I think about 9/11. Think about Ian Tomlinson being hit by a policeman at the G20 riots. All them were shot on mobile phones or handycams. All of them are really pixelated images. Yet when you replay them in your mind, you replay them in high definition. You see them as clearly as anything that you'll see on any screen. And I think that's really important. I mean, that's kind of justification in the argument that I had with Will back then. If there's a cause for it, if there's a reason for it, if there's a justification, it doesn't matter what you shoot it on. The audience will replay it in their mind perfectly. If the story's good enough, job should be done. So I'm going to show you a little clip from the film now. I'm going to show the introduction. So the introduction of the film kind of pieces together quite nicely everything that happens in the film. I should just say, actually, the film isn't about Radio 1 festivals. It was a film that I made for all BBC festivals, and what I wanted to do is try and capture the variety of range of music and different types of festivals for different kind of people that we serve. So if I just... Is the sound on? Are we ready to play?
You a little story. Onion lived on a guitar, like so.
We've got a cameraman here, mobile phone camera. It's from the BBC. So here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Let's say hello to the BBC. 1, 2, 3, hello BBC.
I'm Adam, and I like meeting new people at festivals. I've met all these randoms here.
No Che Guevara, Che Guevara, new revolution.
Hello, my name's Christy. I'm working at Creamfield. Notting Hill Carnival, here we come.
BBC have given us this camera and we're supposed to be filming our experience.
I'm not really in the mood for doing no filming for BBC. What are they going to give me anyway?
Welcome, BBC.
Yes, so I love that scene. Funnily enough, that was the very first clip that I saw from the cameras that was handed back. It was the very first festival that I went to. It was the very first day, and it was the very first thing that I looked at when I got the first phone back and thought, this could be really terrible. And I saw that and I just went, yes, it's great. So, it was kind of really interesting making this film because I'd never made a film before and I learned quite a lot. And some of the things that I learned was that young people these days they've got really creative minds, and what we should do is we should encourage them to experiment as much as possible. We should be sticking phones in their hands, we should be sticking cameras in their hands, and we should be just saying, go out and do what the hell you want. I think there are a lot of similarities between, just going back to what I said at the start of my talk about will we look back in 50, 60, 70 years time at this decade and think it had a huge impact on the media. Well, I think there are a lot of similarities between what's happened in this decade and what happened at the turn of the last century. And basically, what happened at the turn of the last century was photography was starting to grow, and a lot of artists, a lot of the fine artists, kind of looked down the noses at photography. They didn't like it at all. They really didn't like the composition, and they didn't like the quality of it, and they just didn't think it should be seen as art in any way whatsoever. A little bit in the same way that to produce the argument, we've looked down their nose at mobile phone footage. But then strange things started to happen. A lot of the artists started looking at photography, and it changed the way that they painted paintings. If you look at some of the work of Degas, some of his work changed because if you think about before photography, painters would create scenes and they create the perfect scene. But as soon as you get a camera, if I was to take a picture of you now, okay, the natural scene, part of you would be cut off, wouldn't it? You'd get half bodies in the pictures. And Degas noticed this, and all of a sudden he started using cameras and he started taking pictures, and he tried to duplicate that in his paintings. And if you have a look at some of his horse racing scenes or some of his street scenes, all of a sudden you start to notice there might be a horse there, but just to the side of his painting there'll be half a horse, and there might be the back of a wheel of a cart or something, which you never would have seen before. Also, street scenes, beforehand, paintings of street scenes were perfect people walking, but they would never have considered painting a picture of someone with a hand in the pocket, or the way they scratch the nose, or these little things. Cameras capture the natural world the way it is, which painters never really did beforehand. They just assumed that everything was perfect, and photography captured this. And the very first scene of the camera falling and his head being cut off in it, that's the way kids are making films these days. That's the way young people are doing it. They're less concerned about what's perfect, because they just want to catch whatever's happening now. They just want to catch what they're seeing through their eyes, and perfection isn't something that is top of the list for them. It's kind of middling down to bottom. And I just think that's kind of really important. And another comparison between now and the start of the last century was something called the Kodak Brownie, which was a camera that was developed. So up until about 1900, cameras were really expensive, and only the elite could afford cameras. But the Brownie, Kodak developed this camera which took the cost of a camera down from $25 to just $1. In fact, Kodak's big advertising push at the time was you push the button, we'll do the rest. So the whole idea of we've done something really cheap and all you've got to do is just push this button and we'll sort out the rest was kind of a revolution. And it kind of turned it like an empire of photography into a republic of photography, where so many people now could get their hands on cameras and take pictures and do interesting things with them. A bit like now, so many people can just take mobile phones and set up their own YouTube channel and become broadcasters, or blogs have turned people into journalists. This experimentation with cheap cameras at the turn of the last century, so much could be learnt from that, from all the painters and photographers as well. All of a sudden, photographers, instead of having a small elite of people that they can be influenced by, we're starting to see millions of people taking pictures, and you know, the more people that take pictures, obviously, the more that they could learn. And there's a really interesting case of a photographer called Jacques-Henri Letigue. Now, Jacques-Henri Letigue is he's like the ultimate amateur, really. And he did like a series of family albums, which 50 years later, people looked at it and heralded Jacques as the founder of modern art photography. You know, they just loved the freedom of his work. You know, it's free and it's beautifully, and he just had this incredible sort of style. In fact, his work was so free that they would say that you couldn't look at one of his pictures and pin it down to him, because he had so many different styles and he was so free. And they embraced him. But the funny thing was, I don't think they realised that they're embracing the work of an 8-year-old child, because that's what Jack was when he took all these pictures. He was just a young 8-year-old kid going around snapping happy, just going absolutely crazy. And he didn't feel restrained by anything. He was just taking as many pictures as he could, as freely as he could, and creating this great body of work. And there's one picture in particular. There's an absolutely fantastic picture of what appears to be a lady floating. She's kind of, she's got this long dress on and you can't see her legs, and it's like she's about 6 or 7 feet up in the air, and she's floating down some stairs. And people would ask later, Jack, how did you achieve this incredible effect? And he just said, just asked her to jump. And it's kind of that crazy freedom of just trying and just experimenting. Sometimes the most simplest things create magic. And there were so many instances of that I found throughout the film, that there was things that I could never have told people to do that they did themselves. I mean, the shot of the boy playing the guitar, was not playing the guitar, telling the story, was just really engaging. It was a beautiful shot, and it was purely accidental. I don't for a minute think that he kind of spent ages, sitting down trying to get this incredible shot. I think he literally just sat down with his guitar, stuck the phone in it, and started talking. Similarly, the shot of the conductor at the end, absolutely wonderful shot, purely accidental. He just put the phone smack down in the middle of his music stand. Now, if I was to stick this phone down here, chances are, if I was to stick it down there, I might catch the corner of my head or the side of my head, and it was just purely by accident that he got. Not only did he get such a perfect shot of himself, but the music that was kicking off that gig with was the theme tune to 2001: Space Odyssey, which is, I couldn't have asked for a better opening to a film really than that music. So lots of accidents happen, and they can be kind of really fortunate accidents. And finally, just there's one really interesting thing that happened throughout the film that I think is incredibly important. There's a couple called Steve and Holly, and like I was saying before, we tend to assume that young people just haven't got a clue what they're doing, and they don't think, they just click and just go and hope for the best. Steve and Holly were at a festival called Bestival, and like I expected to happen a lot, they got there on a Friday, given the camera, they went out and got trashed, didn't do any filming. Saturday night came, got trashed again, didn't do any filming. And on Sunday night, just before the festival ended, they realised that they hadn't done any filming for me. So they thought, what can we do? So they switched the camera on and filmed themselves, and they said, oh, damn, that guy from the BBC gives the camera. We haven't done any filming, what should we do? So Holly says, let's go and sell the camera. So they filmed themselves just going around trying to sell the camera. And it was a really, absolutely fantastic thing for them to have. I absolutely loved them for it. Because it just showed they had this really great editorial mind. No matter what state they were in, they'd had a really hard weekend. They'd really gone to town, and it was Bestival, and it was late. It was Sunday evening, but even then, they had the editorial wisdom to say, well, we can still create a story. We can still do something great just around this camera. And they went around filming themselves trying to sell the camera, and they got lots of offers, and they tried to up the offer each time, and until eventually they took it to the internet tent and they put it on eBay, and they wanted to see if they could raise enough on eBay to get the ticket for the next year's festival. How am I doing for time? Am I okay for a while? Yeah. Okay. And that's just absolutely brilliant. I think it's really, really incredible that they did that despite the state that they were in. So what did I learn from the project? Well, I learned that we should encourage people to just snap, to film, to take the cameras out of their pockets and film as much as possible. I also believe that I work for the BBC, and it's an important part of my role to innovate and to try new things and to share my learnings with people. And I do quite a bit of speaking at events like this, and I recently spoke to a load of students at Salford University, and I said it's about sharing ideas. It was really, really kind of incredible experience, because I think it was about November that I went and talked to all these students, these media students, and it was about a week ago I got an email from the lecturer saying, I just want you to have a look at this. And she sent me a link to the wiki of all their work, and on this wiki was about 10 films, every one of them shot on mobile phones, and every one of them inspired by some of the ideas that I'd talked to them about. And they were just absolutely incredible. They were absolutely brilliant. I was stunned by the quality of them, but just some of the ideas. There was one film which was about the police had found a mobile phone and been able to piece together the murder based on all the footage that had been caught from these kids that were messing about. There was another story about a man who got trapped inside his mobile phone, and that's just a really, really, truly wonderful experience. Just seeing that, how easy it is for me to go into a college or university to talk a little bit about a film that I've made, and then all of a sudden, just a couple of weeks later, to see 10, 11 different films made, because it's so easy to do it so cheaply. And finally, the reason why I think the BBC should be encouraging this a lot more is because I really am convinced that the next Jonathan Ross and the next Chris Moyles, I'm hoping that we won't pluck them from other channels or from the traditional routes. I'm hoping and I'm assuming that they're out there now and they're doing interesting things, but they're just doing it on the internet. They're doing it on their own websites, they're doing it on their own YouTube channels, and it's just up to us to find them, and it's up to us to encourage people to do that, so that it makes life easier for us in the future when we are looking for talent. So yes, thank you for listening. If you want to follow me on Twitter, my name is @Huey, Huey, and you can watch the entire film at bbc.co.uk/shoot the summer. Thank you.